Hey, Zaka family! Zaka is launching an exclusive membership platform to provide you with career development workshops, coaching, community, and so much more. Go to ZakaConnect.com and sign up to receive information on how to access early registration and perks. Hello, everybody. This is Paul Herman, the Prince of Motivation and host of Zaka Presents My Journey. We're creating this vulnerable and positive platform where you can get inspired and motivated from different leaders from our community. Today, I have the privilege of interviewing this young lady who's already been on the show, Miss Sonya George, who spoke to us last time about her corporate journey, being the vice president at Great Place to Work. But today she joins us to speak to us about motherhood and being a momager. And she's also going to be talking to us about her new book, Aaron Kingsley, School Diaries. They made fun of Milo. That's right. Sonya, welcome to the show.
Hello. Thanks for having me back.
Oh, come on. Thank you for coming back.
Yeah,
right?
My pleasure.
Right. Last time we had some a really good connection, and I love your story of just the whole BK. I know you love in Brooklyn for life, right? But this talking about your journey in corporate America and all the things the struggles, and I think that a lot of our listeners definitely it resonated with them and it hit home and just being an advocate for yourself. So I appreciate you opening up and giving those words over to our listeners in our last conversation. But today we're going to be speaking a little bit more about what you've been doing in this time frame. I know we talked about a lot last time, but since the last time we spoke, could you kind of fill us in on some of the things that you've been in the lab working on?
Yeah. Since the last time we spoke, I realized something about myself that I think I always knew but suppressed, right? So I love my corporate job, right? I love being a momager to my son, but I realized that it wasn't fulfilling enough, those two things, right? Because it's always about giving back to someone else, right? And so I recently joined a private women's group, probably maybe a year and a half, almost 2 years ago. And after talking to these women about, all the things that I'm passionate about, I made a decision to add one of those passion projects to my plate, right? Where it's a project that would serve my personal need of fulfillment, but also have a lasting impact on whomever my target audience would be. And to your point, that project was being a children's book author.
And we're going to talk about this book coming up, and I want to know a lot more about the book, how you got to writing the book, and the inspiration that came to you to get it going. But a question I want to ask you is like being a mother. I know that's probably like maybe the number one priority in your life, right? Or like, what are three things that you learned as a mother that you never would have thought about before being a mom?
Full transparency, I never thought I would be a parent. And my Caribbean mom, guilted me into it. And my now husband and I were like, fine, right? So we did it. And 8 years later, I'm like, thank God for her doing that. I could never see my life without this kid being in it, because he's made me grow so much as a person, right? Not just as a parent. And so if I were to think about like, what are those things, right, that I never thought I would do or be, I think the first one that would come to my mind is like putting my pride aside and apologizing to my kid, right? When I'm wrong, because I'm not always right. And for sure, I've never apologized to anyone as much as I've apologized to this little boy. And as strong as his personality is, he will command an apology. Right. And as much as I'm like, wait a minute, I'm the parent, you're the child, right? I'm like, okay, you're right. But on the flip side, it's also, well, we both need to know when we're wrong in situations and be open enough to admit to our shortcomings and our mistakes and apologize for it and then move on. Right. Because oftentimes without apologizing, you're sitting in that anger and things start to fester and it's not necessary. So he and I are always like, I'm sorry, Aaron. I'm sorry, Mom. All right, let's move on to the next.
Amazing.
Thing.
amazing that you guys have that relationship. But some of the best relationships is when people lean into each other. And the fact that you're leaning into someone who's, sometimes it's hard, when you're like, well, I'm your mom and you're 8 years old. Like, I'm supposed to lean into you. But you can learn a lot from kids, right? And I feel like, as you could see, he's definitely learning a lot from you. I remember in our last conversation, we talked about being an advocate for yourself. So he's advocating at a very young age. The apple doesn't fall too far from the tree. He's like, no, mom, that's not what's going to happen. Right.
I mean, it took me 30-something years to get there, and he got there at 6. So
wait, that means you're a really good teacher, a really good mentor. That your mannerisms are kind of just like poured into this young man. So shout out to that. He has a good mom, Yeah. And I just talking about like your cultural background. I know last time we spoke about it, growing up in Guyana, having Caribbean parents, right? And we already know that the Caribbean parents can be very, very strict, right? And you spoke about that in our last conversations. But like, what are some of the values that you took away from your childhood that you're like implementing right now with your son?
Ooh, okay. So I hate to say it, but nothing from my childhood.
She's like, cut it. No, we're going to develop something whole new. It's 2023.
I think so. I think outside of appreciating your culture and although we're farther away from our culture, but still living in it and continuing to embrace it, there's not much, because there's so much that I grew up with that I just didn't agree with. As a child growing up in that environment, that's just what it is, and you kind of navigate yourself through it and can't wait till you get out of it, right? And like I said, I never thought I'd have my own kid, and when I did, it's like, okay, well, I found myself early on falling into those traps, and I'm like, wait, but this is not who I am, right? So I made a quick left, right? So a lot of things that I felt was wrong as a child, I didn't want to do those things to my child, right? Like it's like one of those things, like it happened to me, so it got to happen to you too. Like, that's silly, right? So for me, it's like, how can I break all of those negative habits? And my mom, when she sees me doing the opposite of what she did, oh my God, she is livid. But she can't say anything because I'm an adult and that's my child. So
that is true. That is true. It's your house, right?
That's right.
And parents will always be like, they want a lot of things that they have taught us to kind of like go in, like pour into us. But then we got to remember that times change, and it's different. Like, these kids nowadays have gone through COVID in a sense, right? There's a whole different ball game, growing up in the 80s,
right.
and the lifestyle back then to the lifestyle now, and social media and all the things that kids have to deal with currently right now. So
that is spot on. Our times are different. The way these kids think are different. Their access to information is different, right? And if we can't evolve, right, we're going to always be in the past, and we're never going to feel as though we are successful in our role as a parent if we don't start thinking about things differently. Because like I said, my son, who he is at 8 years old right now, is who I was at 30. You know what I'm saying? So I need to meet him where he is, and I can't do the things that my parents used to do. Like, I was a different child than my son is. And there's no way I had an opinion, right? When I was a kid, and I don't want to beat that out of him, because having an opinion and understanding yourself at that early age allows you to be the leader that you want to be, when you become an adult.
True. Now, and I'm glad you're hitting on the word opinion right there, because I know you and your son, Aaron, guys have a very strong connection, and you allow him to have, an opinion, and in those conversations, right? And I know sometimes you're like, I don't know if I should, but it's important that you allow your son to have those moments and feel free to have that conversation. How do you think this approach has like influenced him in his childhood?
Yeah. Like you said, Aaron and I talk a lot. And, oftentimes you probably have conversations that most parents won't have with their kids at that age, and most moms won't be having with their sons, right? And I told my son, I'm not going to be an enabler, right? Like, when you grow up, I want to make sure you're respecting women and you're doing the right things. And if you're not, then you have a problem with me, right? And so it's like all these things that I can teach him and mold him at this age. And at the same time, the reason why we talk a lot and talk about every and anything is that, his opinions and his perspectives are just as important as mine. And like I said, I'm not always right. And he knows that, and the other way around. And for me, I want him to fly. I want him to soar, and I want him to have a sense of self, so that he has the ability to kind of navigate in this complex and, sometimes ugly but beautiful world, right?
Mm-hmm.
If I'm not preparing him for that now and I'm stifling who he is as an individual, he's going to be 35 years old trying to figure himself out too. And I don't want that, right? Because the world can chew you up and spit you out at that point.
And the world is changing so rapidly,
Yeah.
right?
Yes.
So as an adult, you have a lot of valuable information to share, with your child, right? So if you're
Mhm.
able to share that information, stuff that you learned about yourself at 30 with someone at the age of 8, by the time they reach 30, they're like, it's not rocket science. It's like, okay, my mother had expressed this to me, I was younger. Our parents, in the Caribbean, it was like they worked hard. They came
Yeah,
to America, and that was like the life lesson we truly learned.
that's
Work
it.
hard, keep your
Correct.
head down.
Correct.
Now it's like you gotta stand up for yourself, advocate for yourself, show up on time. Like there's a lot of other life skills and life lessons that you're kind of like pouring into your son, and like you said, you got to meet him where he is.
Yeah.
And
I remember I was sometimes I work long hours, and I remember my mom came over and she's like, maybe it was like 7 o'clock. She's like, "Oh, you're still working? Aaron is sitting here by himself." And Aaron said, "No, it's okay. Mommy's working because she knows like she needs to make money to get me the things that I want." And I'm like,
hey, I want those Jordans, mom. So
yes, exactly. Like exactly. So that's how I
yeah,
want my son to think about it. You're working to
true.
make life better for yourselves and the people that you are
Mhm.
responsible for.
And it's good to see that, when you that's why I know they have those opportunities where you can bring your kid to work day, and they
Right.
can see exactly what goes on. Now, the relationship you have with your son is definitely a very inspirational one, right? Just from hearing it in your voice. Was this like the backstory behind writing this book? Aaron, the school diaries,
Yeah.
making fun of Milo. Like, could you tell us a little bit more about the process and how you came about this book?
Yeah, and so Aaron Kingsley School Diaries, that's my son's name, right? And so essentially the book will be a series of books, right?
Mm-hmm.
Aaron Kingsley School Diaries, they made fun of Milo, is the first of many, hopefully. And these are real-ish stories, right? I found a way a few years ago to get Aaron to open up to me from our drives home from school when I picked him up. And at first, like he had no desire to talk to me. How's your day? Fine. What does that mean? I don't want to talk about it. And that was like our routine every day for a few weeks, and I was getting frustrated. And then I just used a scare tactic, and I'm like, if you don't talk to me and open up, like you're not gonna get your video games when you go home, right? I'm like, just tell
Hmm.
me one good thing about
Yeah.
today, one bad thing. And I realized like the bad things, when he jumped on that, like that was his like entry into just diarrhea of the mouth. He just kept talking and talking and talking. And I realized, like, holy smokes, like our kids are experiencing a lot during those 6 hours at school.
They're
And
real people. They're real
it's
people.
it's
Real problems. Real
crazy,
issues.
real problems, and they're keeping that all in. Like if they're not talking to you or another adult or someone who cares about them, like they're keeping all that stuff in. And I found that some of the stories that he shared were entertaining, right? I found myself laughing at some. I found myself being sad at some. I found myself being angry at some. And I'm like, oh, these stories would make really great books and learning opportunities for other kids, for parents, for teachers, for caregivers. And so I said to Aaron, look, you go find the stories, have these experiences at school, you come back and share them with me. I will fictionalize them a bit and I will turn them into a learning series for other kids, parents, teachers, caregivers.
That's got to be it kind of warms his heart. The fact that you know at a young age he's contributing to mommy's success and
I
to the
know.
family's. Like, just showing up is just helping, right? Sometimes, but you're like, his stories, his journey, his words, are actually helping you write these books, this diary, right? So
It's a part of him, right?
yeah,
And I'll read him what I wrote, and he's like, "Well, that's not exactly how it happened." No, it's okay. I'm trying to sell these books also. I
there,
gotta make it
here we
sound
go. That's the opinion right there. Now, tell us a
like,
little bit
trust me.
more. Tell us more about the synopsis of the book, and like, what are you trying to teach parents and the children who are reading this book?
Yeah, so it's twofold, right? So for the kids, as a reader, I want them to step into the shoes of Aaron Kingsley as he tackles these delicate issues of bullying, peer pressure, mean kids, self-awareness, right? And the lasting effect that it can have on someone like a Milo character or the main character, Aaron Kingsley, right? And my hope is that the stories will inspire children to embrace kindness, be empathetic, and have respect for others, right? Especially other kids that are like them and not like them. And also, where we encourage these kids to stand up against any negativity and have the ability to create a good environment for everyone, right? And so that's how, like, that one full, like, what will kids get out of this book? That's that.
Mm-hmm.
For
Mm-hmm.
the, like, parents, adults, caregivers, teachers, so on and so forth, it's knowing that frequent conversations with any kid, right, their kids, will provide an opportunity to connect with them on many levels, and having the ability to create this safe space where a child can come and talk to you about anything without any
Mm-hmm.
judgment
That's
is
true.
so powerful. Because there are days I'll see Aaron and he looks really sad, and I know something is wrong, and I'll say, "What's wrong?" And he says nothing, and I can easily just keep walking, right? Because he said he gave me the permission to leave when he said nothing. But I'm like, no, I know you, right? I'm not going to make this a missed opportunity. What's wrong? Come on, just talk to me. And he'll feel that I'm really present for him in that moment, and he'll just go, and we'll talk, and we'll get through it, whether it's something I did or something he experienced or his dad or whatever it may be. And we'll talk about it and get to the other side of it. And that's not something that's sitting and festering, right? And becoming something bigger than it is. So for adults, like, find that time to talk to these kids at this age, because these books are for school age kids, right? I think from age 3 to 10, where they're the most impressionable, vulnerable, and when they need us the most.
Mm-hmm. And you mentioned a key word, festering. We as adults, there's always talks about like us festering that negative energy that could carry with us wherever we go. So we sometimes forget that kids have the same type of issues, same type of problems, and it might not be a mortgage, but it could be that toxic relationship in school where your friends may bullying you and stuff, and you fester that in, and then before you know it, you're like, "Is everything okay, honey?" "No, I'm fine. I'm good. I'm good. I'm good." And they keep on, putting it under the rug, and it leads to other things, with
Absolutely.
it, and mentally that could affect a child. And I know that's a very big struggle that a lot of parents, are always worried about, that they're not going to have that connection with their kids, that
Mm-hmm.
organic connection where you could easily just speak to them and they could speak back to you.
Mm-hmm.
Parents are like, he just doesn't talk to me,
For
right? But
some,
he talks to his uncle, but he won't talk to me directly. He
yeah.
talks to his teachers. So something I want to ask you is like, what would you say to some of the listeners who are like listening to the interview, wondering about like why champion a strong like parent communication is like good without when they live in I want to say a strict household, like
Mm-hmm.
growing up in a strict household.
Yeah. I mean, that's my scenario, right? I think I said this earlier, I believe, but I think it's about living a fulfilled life and having the ability to be well-rounded as an individual. And I'm saddened at the fact that I didn't get to where I am today until I was in my 30s. I didn't realize I had a voice, or I had the ability to have a voice when I was a kid. So I don't think I fully capitalized on my childhood, right? I feel like there were so many missed opportunities. Like, to your point, my parents are like, "I came to this country. We got to work because we got to get food and put a roof over our heads, and we got to get a car, and eventually we got to buy our own place," right? It's just always like there's this thing that we need to continuously do, and that's our eye on that prize. And it's like kids just come along with us as opposed to pausing and saying, like, "Hey, how was your day? How's school? How are you feeling? What do you need? What do you think? What are your dreams? What do you want to do?"
Mm,
Like, those
mhm,
conversations
mhm,
weren't had in my household. So I just learned how to suppress my thoughts and my feelings, and that's not healthy, right? Because you sit with that stuff for a long time, and that's not what I want for my kid, right? And I
mhm,
think it's my responsibility as a parent to create that safe environment for my kid, one, so that he has the access he needs to the information that's important to him. And I'm also there to help control some of his narrative. Because, to your point, with technology, like, if I'm not helping him, somebody else is, and they're probably not giving him the right advice. So I need to hear that.
That's very big right there. Not every advice is the good advice.
Correct.
So it's hard, when, sometimes your kids are like, well, I only want to take advice from this person and not from mommy and daddy, So again, commend you on the relationship that you have with Aaron and that communications. Now, a big question I need to really, really dive into, right? We talked about the whole corporate America last time, but I really want to know, how are you managing as a momager, right? Managing Aaron, doing corporate America. How are you doing this? And also putting out a book. Like, that's a lot of juggling in one household. Yeah. How are you doing it? What's the secret?
I'm tired. I'm fortunate. I am completely blessed. I've been with Great Place to Work for 11 and a half years. I never thought I'd be at a company for that long. One, I love the work that I do. I enjoy the people that I work with. But they also respect that I'm a whole person, right? And my two leaders that I report to is our CEO and our EVP. And it's a great place to work for me, right? That's the name of the company, and that's how I feel about working there, because they understand all the things I do outside of work is equally as important to me. So they allow the space to do that, right? And the only request that they have is be present when I need to be present and exceed my targets, which I do, right? Because I find time to get it all done. And oftentimes you're like, oh, I don't know when I can find the time. And then when you really sit back and start planning out your day, it's like, oh, I can find the time, right? I don't need to be watching The Housewives for 3 hours. I can use that time to do something else, or do something else while I'm watching The Housewives, right? So it's always finding the time, but prioritizing what you need to prioritize when you need to do that. And I remember a few years ago when Aaron was in Greece for 2.5 months shooting Rise. I was there with him for 2.5 months, and so we were 10 hours ahead of where my company is based in the Bay. And so during the day, he's on set and he's practicing or whatever, and I'm there with him. And then we'd come back to the hotel, and from that afternoon until 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning, I'm working, right? And I'm in meetings. So you can do it if you like I said, know how to prioritize, have a company that fully supports you as a person, right? I don't know if I would be a great place to work that long if they didn't fully support me in that way. And I probably wouldn't work as hard as I do if they weren't supporting me in the way in which they're doing.
Okay. Now, when you said you were on set, you said for 3 months?
2.5.
Oh, 2.5. I was like, that's a good amount of time.
Yeah.
That's a good amount of time.
Yeah.
Now, I know traditional Caribbean parents were like some, in a sense, you know how it is. Growing up, they were like doctor, lawyer. You're doing like the total opposite. You're allowing your child to be an actor, the actor that he is. What are some of like the struggles you have in regards to that?
I'm in the driver's seat, so I don't care what my mom says. Right? Okay. It's one of those things. You've raised me to be the person that I am today.
That is correct.
I have a lot to do with that too. So you have to be respectful of my decision making, and like Aaron is well taken care of. Like, he is her prize, right? So I understand. It's like, oh, you're taking him away to this foreign country that you've never been to for this long period of time. Like, what is he going to be okay? I'm like, Greece is like, it's not like it's a third world country where we're like searching the earth for water, right? It's fine. We're staying in a hotel, and it's just getting her to understand the world, because she sees the world differently. Right? And
true. And some of our parents, they didn't have the ability to travel as much,
correct.
Right? And correct. You're at a place right now with your son, and being able to work remotely, you're able to travel and stuff. Tell us a little bit more about Greece. Like, what was he shooting at that time, and what did you like about it?
We love Greece. Was amazing. We were in Athens. That's where they were filming. It's the movie Rise, the story of Giannis Antetokounmpo.
Okay. Yes.
And
okay.
He played one of his younger brothers when they were earlier on in life, and it was such a great experience being there. We were there with the other few young Black boys, some from the U.S., some from the U.K., who were all part of the movie. And being in a place where you don't see too many Black and brown people. And if you do, they're on the streets hustling for $1. Right.
Mm.
So it was interesting when we would go to these nice restaurants or go on tours, and people were just so amazed to see Black people like enjoying a meal like they are, or on a tour. I remember this one woman walked up to Aaron, and I don't know, she thought he was like on display, but she just started touching his face and his hair. And
Oh, wow.
I didn't see it, and another mother saw it, and she slapped the woman's hand.
Oh, wow.
And the woman was just taken aback because she didn't think she was doing anything wrong, because I don't think she'd ever encountered seeing a black kid. So they had to explain that situation to Aaron. So we learned a lot. There's a lot of learnings when we were there, but it was an amazing experience.
You learn a lot about yourself on the road. It's not like it's not your own house, right? It's a different country, different culture, different food. The time difference as well too. Like you said, 10 hours ahead, 10 hours behind. That's a massive difference. Like now, growing up, Aaron, like how did you determine that acting was like a great thing for Aaron? Like how did you even conceive that this is something that he's going to be doing?
I just, I'm an introvert, believe it or not, and his dad is somewhat of an introvert, so he says. And Aaron just had this big personality as a kid, and he wasn't like loud or over the top. There's just something warm and inviting about him, and strangers would just walk up to him and just talk to him, and he had no problems like not being with us, right? Anyone taking him away, like he's not like, no, mommy and daddy, like that never had been the case with him. I always refer to him as like the kidnapper's dream. And I'm like, and then he had a lot, like I said, big energy. And I said, I wanted to put that into something. So what could he do at 1.5 years? Right? Because that's when I started. And I said, let me see. I took a few pictures on my phone of him and sent it around to different managers and agents in New York City. And maybe after 3 or 4 months, we found a manager, and it started from there. And he booked his first job at 18 months. And every so often, because I mean, he and I fight a lot when we do these auditions. Don't get me wrong. It's not like roses, right?
Yeah, he's not like, yeah, mom, I'm ready.
Opinionated. I'm telling him how to do it, and he's telling me how he wants to do it. And so every so often, I'm like, do you still want to do this? Like, is this something that you're committed to? We can pull back if you need to. And he's like, no, I still want to do it. I still want to do it. Let me just take a breather. Let me walk away and calm down, and we'll come back and we'll get through this this audition. So it's I want to make sure you're in it, and I'm not pushing you to do it, right? So we have that back and forth.
And when I know that's definitely a hard, thin line right there, because, when you find something that, your child is good at, you're like, well, okay, let's push, because this right there could be the big thing for them, but you're still along the way giving him an opinion, giving him an opportunity to speak up and say, mom, I just don't really like this anymore. And you move on, I want to know, like what type of advice would you give to like a parent, that has a child that, wants to pursue like music or acting, but like, sometimes you might be too afraid because the negative influences. I mean, I know that you travel with Aaron, but sometimes parents don't have the ability to do that or have someone with them, their child. So like what would you recommend to a parent trying to get their child invested in singing, acting, dancing, getting into this like industry that could sometimes consume you?
Right. I have 2 pieces of advice, but before I share, I would say the industry is quite different now, right? Where you don't have the luxury of not being around. Some adult who is responsible for that child needs to be with that child, right? Whether it's the parent or you've assigned a caregiver, someone needs to be there to oversee everything that's happening, right? It's no longer acceptable for the child just to be anywhere without adult supervision. And from a money perspective, like these kids now have to have their own bank accounts, and checks are being deposited into their bank accounts, so on and so forth. So a lot of ways to protect kids so that things that happened in the 80s and 90s will not happen.
Because there was a lot of people who went broke back then. Bad. It was bad. It was a lot of people bankrupt. You're like, what you were the best in the game. How'd you go bankrupt? But that's again because things weren't put in place. So I'm glad that you're speaking up and letting people know that to feel a little bit more comfortable because there are things in place.
For sure. And so the advice, I would say 70% of the work is the parent, 30% is the child. So if you as a parent or a caregiver can't lean in, don't do it. It's a lot of work, so don't do it. Like my friend is like, I'm a teacher, but I want to do it. Well, can you jump and go in an audition tomorrow morning if they call you? No, I'm at school, then don't do it.
Yeah,
Right?
right.
They're not
Yeah,
going to
right.
hire you. So, and then they're going to stop calling you because you can't do it. So don't
Yeah,
waste
you
your
can't
time.
show up. Yeah, yeah.
You can't show up. And the other piece is, like I said, if your kid isn't into it, then don't do it. Like, I think my kid is the most beautiful child in the world, and I want them to be a model. They're gorgeous, but do they want to do it? No, they're shy. Then don't do it.
Yeah, don't
Right? Because
push
it's
it.
a business. And let me tell you, one time Aaron had a toddler meltdown at, and I'll say, I hope he's not around because he's going to kill me for saying this, but he had a toddler meltdown at a Gap audition. And he looked so cute. I'm like, oh, he's in. He's gonna get his photos came out well. But he was playing around with these other kids, and the kid had some toy, like I don't know if it's Paw Patrol or whatever toys. Then the kid went to audition and took his toys with him, and Aaron was livid. Like he's bawling in this audition. And they're like, your son is gonna have to leave. I'm like, thank you very much. Have a good day.
Ooh, ooh,
And we ran out of there, right? Like, so things like that happen. So for me, it's like, you got to know your kid is in it. If they're not, then don't. It's a tough industry to push a kid to want to be part of, right? Because there's a lot that we're asking of them. So those are the two pieces of advice I would give.
Mm. Wow, 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 wow. You do have a busy life, young lady. I'm just listening over here. I'm like, this just sounds like a lot going on. And then you got to go to work. And then you got to go to work. Now, what is like one of the proudest moments of just in regards to going back to that book? Like, what is one of the proudest moments that you have with this book? I know that the relationship is obviously gotten a lot stronger between you and Aaron because of the book as well, right? But like, what is another proud moment?
Um, I love when I see people who've purchased the books go and write Amazon reviews about it. That because what the message I'm trying to convey, they're receiving that and they're communicating it back, so that feels good. I think the most powerful though is at the end of each book, there's a question posed to the reader that says, what would you do if you were Aaron Kingsley? And then I give them some multiple choice options, like, would you do the same thing or do it differently? And I love to see kids talking through it, right? And really pausing and thinking. And I also like parents answering that, because for me, it's like with them, they made fun of Milo, right? Because in that book, Aaron actually helped the kid, and that was a real story, like a real situation, right, where he helped this kid in his class. And he said to me, Mommy, like when you were my age, would you have helped him or would you have been one of the kids laughing? I'm like, I hate to say it because of peer pressure. I probably would have felt bad, but probably been with the kids who may have been laughing or acting like I'm not part of the situation, right? So it's one of the things to be honest and then talk about why, if that was my decision when I was a kid, why was it wrong, right? And why should it be different? So that's the part I love, kids really unpacking like what they would do in a certain situation.
Now, with your book, I know that a lot of authors have their own style, their own like jazz to it. You know what I'm saying? Like their own spin on it. So, like, what is like a one of the values that you want your audience to gain from your style of writing?
Let me think.
I see obviously I see one strong, like having that strong connection with the message you're trying to convey. I could see that because the message is coming from the conversations and the relationship you have with your son, and it's
Right.
being conveyed into the book. So I could see that happening. But is there something else that you want us to gravitate to?
Yeah. How to be better decision makers and critical thinkers, right? As a child, as you're starting to learn and be more self-aware of who you are and having the ability to make decisions on your own without the influence of others. The importance of, I mean, the biggest value is the importance of kindness, being kind and building strong relationship with people around you, especially those who aren't like you, right? To understand other perspectives. And the last piece, which we've been talking about, right? The importance of good communication between parents and their kids.
Oh, honestly, you didn't drop some gems right there. And I appreciate you for always, from the first conversation that we had in our previous interview with you, right? And to now, it's like I gained so much knowledge, and I know that the listeners as well too. And it's so inspirational to hear the connection you have with Aaron. I know that Aaron's gonna hear this interview. Aaron, just want to give you a big shout out, homie. You're doing an
Shout out,
amazing
Aaron.
job. Keep it up. I know you. I know you representing Brooklyn like mom over here. So shout out to you. You got to give a shout to the homie himself, right? So any last words for the listeners?
Just the world is so dark right now. And I just always feel like a little kindness and a little empathy goes a long way. And like, if I were to think about what is my ultimate goal for starting this project with these books, it's really, I don't know if you remember when we were younger, like ABC had those after school like specials around whatever the topic of the moment was. That was like those like short shows that they would show after school around like peer pressure or suicide or whatever it may be. We need to bring those back.
Remember, what's his name? The McGruff, the dog.
Right.
Fighting crime, stranger like, danger. That was big.
You remember, and you learn those things. I mean, we need those things back again for our kids. I think we've lost sight of that. And I hope like one day somewhere, like we could turn some of these concepts in this book into some after school specials or in like short snippets, because these kids, their attention span is really short.
She had to throw that out there. Hold on. Just let you know, like short. It's gotta be short. It is you're hitting it right on the money right there. Having those things back then for us, like, we sometimes we took it for granted, right? But kids nowadays there are more topics besides, fighting crime, staying away from like drugs and stuff. That's like the common stuff. But let's talk about bullying and finding your identity. These are things that like kids are truly facing now. So I can only imagine what these diaries, these books that you got coming out are gonna, look like in the near future. I feel like you're doing a phenomenal job in regards to the work that you're doing, the inspiration that you're trying to give to adults and also to students, and giving young kids an opportunity to hear from other students. As we are hearing on Zaka, hearing from other immigrants and hearing about their stories and their journey, you're giving a platform to young individuals like your son to speak up and say certain things that's going to hopefully inspire other young individuals to speak up and advocate for themselves. So congratulations. So proud of the work you're doing. I'm looking forward to our third interview. Hint, 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 because this book is going to end up so many other places. So, I might have to come over there and interview you on set with Aaron or something. Well, congratulations again on everything. And I just want to let the listeners know, if you want to hear more stories like Sonya, check us out on ZakaConnect.com or follow our feed Zaka wherever you listen to your podcast.